All right.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Winephabet Street, our third trip around the sun, and we are at the letter I, and we are talking Isabella grape today. And I didn't even know that was a grape. So I'm excited to learn more about this. And so if you don't know who I am, my name is Lori. My husband Michael and I own Dracena Wines in Paso Robles. We will soon be opening up a tasting room, so it'll be the first time with a brick and mortar. And at the other side of the table, I am exploring the wine glass. I am WSET level 2. I am a Spanish wine scholar, UC Davis winemaking graduate program graduate, champagne specialist, and Côte d'Aron specialist. And I am excited because it's been a while since I've seen my colleague Deb. So she's here with me.
Hey, before I introduce myself, can you send Michael the link? Michael Kelly.
Oh,
yes. Email came over and he needs the link to join. So I am Debbie Giaquindo. I am known as the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I only have winephabetstreet.com and get it.
Okay.
I'm a wine blogger, a wine writer, restaurant owner, author. I own a restaurant in North Wildwood called Trio North Wildwood. We're hiring for the summer season. So if anybody listening to this knows anybody that's a good server, busser, dishwasher, line cook, send them my way. Did I miss anything? I'm a certified specialist of wine, a wine location specialist in port and champagne, and a certified wine sherry specialist. And that's probably about it. Host of Winephabet Street with Lori. We're in our third season. And today we're talking about the Isabella grape, which is fairly new to me. And we've got Steve Casscles here, who is an expert on it. And he's an expert on all hybrids. But Steve, do you want to give us a little introduction on yourself?
Sure.
Not hybrid.
Hybrids, yeah. Most people are afraid of the word hybrid. They think it means like GMO and stuff like that, and they're not anything like that. Anyway, my name is Steve Casscles, and I've been making wine since I was the age of 13 years old at Benmarl Vineyards. So this is like my 50th year making wine. So it's kind of hard to believe. I have a farm in Athens, New York called Cedar Cliff Farm Vineyards. And what I do is I work with Malaya Estate Vineyards. And what they do is we have something called the Hudson Heritage Project. So basically it's grape varieties that were either brought to the Hudson Valley in the 1950s from France, or grapes that were developed in the Hudson Valley in the 19th century, or that came from the Boston area in the 19th century also. So basically I work with heritage grape varieties. I like them because they can be grown sustainably. They have lots of different flavor profiles. They're fungus disease resistant. They're productive. The other thing that I did was there's a book called Grapes, the Hudson Valley and Other Cool Climate Regions of the U.S. and Canada. As it turns out, that book was sold out about 2 years ago and it's going to print again. So a second edition is coming out, and it'll be pretty much the first edition, only will have 2 new chapters on grape varieties that were developed in the Boston area in the 19th century. So it'll be organized the same way, where it's sort of like it will describe the hybridizer, like Rogers from Salem, the grapes that he did, and then also grapes like that were done by Ephraim Bull, like Concord. So it will have all those kinds of things. So later on, I'll tell Debbie, about all these kinds of things, so that if your subscribers want to get that book at all. But it's kind of fun. But what it does is it talks about like all these different kind of grape varieties, including Isabella, what kind of wines they make, where they came from, how they developed, and that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much me, I guess.
Awesome. Great. Well, that's a lot too. So that's cool. So before we get into Isabella, and this is honestly, I think, a first for Debbie and myself, we don't have a wine.
No, we have no wine.
We have no wine.
We've got water. Can we turn the water into wine?
You can get water on. So I have one wine, but again, I only make 15 gallons of it. And I got the grapes from the Finger Lakes. And the reason I bought the grapes was because I've heard of the grape variety. I'll have you ask questions, but what I'll do is I'll talk about the derivation of where the grape came from and then where my interest came into the grape.
Okay.
So
absolutely. So before we get into talking about Isabella, we are going to get Elmo to come visit us. So here we go. welcome. All right, Isabella.
I picture a beautiful woman, kind of with like Greek, type of thing.
I just go to Isabella Rossellini.
Hair, clothes.
Yeah, yeah. So, Steve, Isabella, it's considered, quote, a hybrid grape, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so, how does Lambrusca differ from vinifera? We don't, we don't have any wine, so I can't we can't. You can
Describe what they are. It's an
so
older.
Is it red grape, white grape, thick skin, thin skin? What color? Because I also read a lot that it was a rosé and it was different.
Yeah, you can make a lot of. It's very versatile in the cellar, so you can do a lot of things. It's a deep purple black grape, and where it came from is basically in the 1820s. There were people in Europe who were bringing vinifera grapes over to the U.S. to try and grow them. They didn't live, but what they did is those first few years in which they were alive, they were flowering and they were putting pollen to other Native American grapes and then creating new grape varieties. So what Isabella is something called a chance hybrid or a chance seedling from a garden that came somewhere in the South, probably either South Carolina, North Carolina, Delaware. They're not really sure. So basically there was a person who was growing a vinifera of some sort. It lived there for a little while. It pollinated a local grape variety. It created grapes. The grapes fell on the ground. A chance seedling showed up which was this chance seedling. The reason it's named Isabella is that there was a horticulturist in Brooklyn, New York, and his name was George Gibbs. And what he did was he planted that grape, in his garden in Brooklyn. And there's a very famous nurseryman called William Prince from Flushing. There's the Prince Nurseries and Leninton Botanical Gardens, which is in Flushing, which is like one of the biggest gardens in the U.S. as far as like propagating and selling grape material or any other kind of fruits. So he went to the house, liked the plant, got cuttings of it, put it back in his nursery, started selling it. And it was actually when it was found in 1816. There wasn't really a lot of grapes that could actually really grow in the U.S. So it was actually the standing the thing that was that made it good for this grape was because it at least grew fairly well and you could make okay wines out of it. The reason it's called Isabella is because George Gibbs, who's the guy from Brooklyn who had this chance seedling, his wife's name was Isabella. So they named it after his wife.
That's some bonus points right there.
Yeah, so they do it that way. So
serious.
Yeah. So
serious.
And just this guy William Prince, who found the grape and then started propagating. He did that with a few other varieties. This is actually the 300th anniversary of that vineyard or that nursery. It started in 1723, and then it finally went out of business in 1869. And there was 5 generations of the Prince family in Flushing who were growing grapes and selling. And actually, it was one of the centers of horticulture in the U.S. as far as like propagating grapes, selling grape varieties and apples and other kinds of things like that. And beautiful. And there was actually 10 other very large nurseries in Flushing. So it was actually the center for the U.S. for when it came to propagating plant material. So
the grape was actually, so that's a little different than typical because the typical hybrid, the Lambrusca, whatever, usually is man-made, right? It's usually they took something that they liked in here and something that they liked in here, and the mad botanist put them together. But this was actually a chance crossing.
It was a chance. And actually, initially, in the early 1800s, most of the new Native American grapes that were being created were actually chance seedlings that were found in other places. Like a grape, I think you covered Delaware one time.
Yep.
Yes.
Delaware came from probably somewhere in the Maryland area, and then it found its way into a garden in Ohio. And then the guy liked the grape variety, started propagating it, sent it to a guy named Downing, who's in Newburgh, who was a nurseryman. And then he said he identified it as being a grape that was unique and different. So he says, this is a different variety. So he says, that's really great. Well, what should we name it? Well, the guy who sent the grape to Downing from Newburgh was in Delaware, Ohio. So he named it Delaware.
He did not get as much bonus points as naming it after your wife.
Wife.
Yeah. Well, not my wife. No, the wife.
No,
of George.
yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't get as much bonus points as the guy who named it after his wife.
Yeah, exactly. The other one too, very quickly, is like Catawba, another Chance hybrid. So it turns out it has Labrusca in it, but Southern Labrusca, so it's kind of like a dull, kind of like amber color. It turns out they just the last few years they did genetic testing on it. It turns out Catawba is a hybrid of a local grape somewhere in like North Carolina, and Semillon, which is a grape that's used in Bordeaux. So Catawba, is 1/2 vinifera, and one of the children, French. And one of the children of Catawba is a grape called Concord.
Oh,
Concord is a hybrid of Catawba and something else. So Concord, which is found in Concord, Massachusetts, and created there as a Chance Seedling, is 1/4 vinifera. They're all Chances. So initially they were all Chance hybrids.
Oh, okay.
So with Isabella, oh shoot, hold on a second. I just deleted the thing. Anyway, with Isabella, who are the parents then?
They have no idea. I think genetically they're getting better as far as doing genetic testing to figure out what it is. So like with Catawba, they did a genetic testing of that, and they realized at least the mother was Semillon. So, and then they did a genetic testing of Concord because they thought that might have had something to do with it. And then they found out that it had Catawba in it. So you have to do tests, and it's pretty expensive to do a test for each different variety. So, and also to know what you're looking for too. So,
okay. So let me ask you this. Okay, I was on the phone with another gentleman who grows Isabella, and he had mentioned that, and I might have misunderstood, but somehow Spain was involved.
Spain.
Oh, Spain.
Okay.
So he said that it kind of, I'm not quite sure if he said it originated in Spain or it went to Spain.
I think what probably happened is that when you had phylloxera and the other diseases that were imported from the U.S. to France, and it started like knocking out all their vineyards, Isabella was one of the grapes that was used and brought back to France and planted. Oh, so it probably was a grape that was brought back to Spain, and Spain had the phylloxera problem too, not as much as France. So I suspect it's a grape that came from the U.S., Isabella, and then went to Spain and then France. Mostly went to France.
Okay, and is it successful in New York State? I mean, do a lot of people grow it?
Not as much. I mean, again, remember the time frame you're in 1816 or so, there weren't many grape varieties that you could grow successfully in the U.S. The vinifers did not work well at all. You didn't have the French-American hybrids at all. What people were doing is looking, and they wanted fruit. So what they were doing is looking at people's gardens and finding out what lived. So that's where they found Catawba and Delaware and Isabella and Iona. All of those and Humilian, they're all Chance hybrids that seem to be alive. So they started propagating them. So that's where they came from. So they were good enough for the time, and they were the only thing that could live. I mean, quite candidly, you don't see much Isabella being grown in New York anymore, and the reason is because it ripens fairly late. So, and it's also it's very foxy. We can talk about that later on as far as what foxy means. So, but it's a very grapey, heavy, musky wine, but it also ripens in fairly late, and it's actually somewhat susceptible to fungus diseases. So there's better grapes now, so you don't see much of it in the U.S.
All right, so it was actually in New York. It's mostly ripped up and planted to Concord, right? Yes.
I mean, what happened is Concord was really the Walmart of grapes. When it was found in 1853 and started being propagated, from when it was introduced by Hovey in Boston in 1853, by 1865, half of all the vineyards east of the Mississippi River were Concord. So they ripped out everything else because it lived. It was productive. It made an okay wine. It made a fine juice. It was a good table grape that held. So basically, it was like an acting. It was the triple threat. You could make wine out of it. You could make juice out of it, and it would ship. So basically, people ripped everything else out, and then they put in Concord. So that's how that worked out. So, and I'm trying to I have it here somewhere where, because I wrote this down as far as, it might be right here, but it does turn out that yes, okay, I do have some stats as far as that Isabella is actually grown in other parts of the country. So even though it ripens pretty late in New York, and it's not very good for fungus disease resistance in New York, it turns out it's grown in tropical areas. So in Brazil, there's 26,000 acres of Isabella in there.
Wow.
And they make mostly rosés out of it. So that's Brazil. India, it's called Bangalore Blue, and there's 11,000 acres. If you go to Moldova, which is near the Ukraine, there's another 26,000 acres. And actually, if you go to an average wine shop, if you see wines from Moldova, they are pretty much going to be Isabella. So,
okay.
And that's why, but it is versatile in this way that like it can make really big, heavy, inky wines. It can make kind of rosé kind of wines. So you can do a lot of different things with it. So the main places where it's grown is Brazil, India, Moldova, and the Ukraine. The Ukraine, I think there's like 5,000 acres there. So,
well, that makes a lot more sense. If it's such a late ripener, that's pretty tough in New York State, you know, or you know, in a Michigan or in some place like that. So
yeah,
it makes sense.
And again, so it was popular until about like say 1840, and then Concord came in and that took care of that. Same thing with Catawba. It was like pretty popular in New York because it would grow okay, but it also ripened really late in the season. So once other grapes started coming in, that went away. Now, a lot of the work that I do through the book and my other work dealing with hybridizers, a lot of hybridizers did their work in Newburgh, New York, in the Hudson Valley, in the Boston area, and also in St. Louis. And what they were doing is they were hybridizing Native American grapes, wild grapes, and vinifera, and they were trying to basically create varieties that would meet their needs, which was really ripen earlier, be more fungus disease resistant, have bigger berries so that you can like use them as table grapes or as wine grapes. So in the Hudson Valley, a guy Ricketts from Newburgh developed grapes like Empire State, Jefferson, many other ones, but basically they're big bunch berries that with wines that are very soft that taste like guava. So he actually is very successful, and that's one of the grapes that we're actually shipping to California now to propagate more of them. So basically, it's a grape that like ripens fairly early, has fairly good sugar, so like 20% or so. It's fungus disease resistant, and then can either be used to make either as a table grape or as a wine grape. So, but that's when you started seeing a lot of hybridizing. You saw it actually in the U.S. before France. So, like, really, there's a lot of hybridizing in the Hudson Valley, Boston, and St. Louis area from the 1840s to about the 1880s. When phylloxera hit France, you saw a lot of hybridizing starting there, like 1870s to about 1930. So it's a very different thing. So a lot of the component grapes they used in France were grapes that were developed in the Hudson Valley.
Cool. So now I don't know if you could answer this, but it's kind of more of an opinion question. So I had read that Isabella actually is banned in most European countries for any PDO or PGI level wines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do you think there's such a like almost hatred for it?
I think particularly in France, what it was is like it was brought in when all of the other vinifera grapes were dying, so they wanted something they needed to have, because I mean it used to be in France in the 1870s or so, wine, people didn't drink water, they drank wine, and pretty much 15% of the entire economy was based on the production of wine. So it'd be sort of like the U.S. not making cars. I mean, it was like a big part of their economy. So they had to find something, anything they could make wine for their own consumption and also for export. I mean, the thing is that compared to French wines, I mean, you know a lot about French wines, but I'm saying that the Isabella is very like, it's kind of musty. We can talk about what foxy means. And it's grapey, it's like that. So it was not something that they viewed as being a wine that they really wanted to kind of propagate a lot more. So once they found other French-American hybrids like Chelois and Baco, they started planting them and then requiring that they rip out things like Isabella. The other thing that Isabella did with Shiraz and a few of the other ones that came from America, the other reason that, at least politically, they ripped a lot of these varieties out is because, again, the flavors were not up to what I think French wanted to be in their wine. But the other thing, too, is they were highly productive. So basically you could get 6 tons an acre, while most of the other varieties were getting 2 ton an acre. So basically, it was kind of like Concord. It was the Walmart. It was like, it's good enough, and you can get 6 ton an acre. And that put competition against other bigger commercial growers who said, I don't want to compete against an Isabella where they're getting 6 ton an acre and I'm only getting 2 ton an acre. So I'll talk to my local legislator and we'll pass a law and we'll ban it. So that's what they did.
So Karen, who is in the chat, she said she was reading while you were talking, and she read that Isabella makes a great jam and juice because of its sweetness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sweet. It's like around 18-20. Yeah, so it's sweet that way, but it's very grapey. This might be a good time to talk about Foxy. You've heard the term Foxy as far as with like Concords, and a lot of people will assume that Foxy means like Concord wines. It turns out Foxy predated Concord, and really it's a description for wines that are like Isabella. And Isabella is a grape that is like very grapey, very musty, very soft. And the reason I called it Foxy was because it smelled like a wet fox or a wet dog, because it was musty. So it's not, when you hear of Concord and that's Foxy, there's many different kinds of Labruscas that have different flavor profiles, but the traditional meaning of Foxy was very musty and grapey and soft. So that is what Isabella is like.
Is it high acid?
No, very soft.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why it makes a good juice. So it's like, it's pretty sweet, but doesn't have a lot of acid. That's why wine grapes don't make very good juice grapes, because they got too much sugar and too much acid. You want things like Concord, which are like 60% alcohol or 16% sugar and softer acids, or maybe like a little acid to give it a little bite. But Isabella is very soft, very, very soft. And also, too, it's got a lot of color. So if you crush it up and let it sit for like a few hours, you're going to pick up all the color. So it's very, very inky. So this is, that's it right here. That's what it looks like. So, and I pulled that. I don't know if you have the picture of the barrel, but
yeah, I'm going to show that. I'm going to show
Okay.
it. I think I started sharing.
Uh-huh.
No, it didn't work.
So I only make 15 gallons of it. So
It says sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I did. It's in here, but it's not working.
Okay. Well, it's a little barrel. That's all you gotta say.
Yeah, I have the picture of it.
Yeah. No problem. So,
But
and just the reason
not working.
the reason I made the Isabella is because it's the 300th anniversary of the Prince Nurseries in Flushing. So I've been working with the Queen's Botanical Garden about doing a celebration on that family and that nursery in that area. So Isabella was one of the grapes that Prince brought to the fore in the United States and export to other places. So I figured it would be kind of nice for a celebration to make a 15 gallons or 20 gallons of an Isabella to use at the Queen's Botanical Garden.
Oh, that's nice. Have you worked with Isabella before?
That's the only time I've ever worked with it. So,
oh, okay. And how did you find working with it? Positive,
it was actually
negative?
very easy, great to make wine out of. I mean, basically, the pH is pretty good, the acid's pretty good. Yeah, it was easy to make wine out of it. Actually, yeah. So it's actually it's at the pH and the sugar levels are like what you'd find for an average French American hybrid or a vinifera as far as making wine out of it. And actually, its pH is a little bit lower, so it actually makes it a lot easier. So the wines are pretty soft.
That's what I was going to ask. What do you bring when you bring it in? What are your technicals when you're bringing them in?
I'm sorry to say I don't do a lot of technicals. I was educated actually by people at Ben Marl who were taught in France, and they were not. I mean, I like the idea of chemistry. I want to have a wine lab. I'm 63 years old. I don't have one by now. I probably won't have one going in the future. So I base everything on taste. So when I get the juice and when I get the wines, I do a lot of blending. So I've got a high acid wine, a low acid wine. I blend together. So I don't do testing on that stuff. I'd like to, but I never did. I feel bad about that. So
I just was I'm thinking of like the pH of that and microbial aspect of it.
It was clean. I mean, it was clean. So it was like it had enough acid where it was clean. It will always stay clean. So people like, probably 3.5 or something like that. So it'll be in that range. So, and I'm pretty good tasting things. I can tell like a 3.7 from a 3.2. So I can do that. And basically, I'm looking for a wine or looking to make things that people like. So as long as people like it, I don't care if it's 3.4 or 3.7. I don't care. So yeah.
So I'm laughing because my husband and I play a game when it gets close to harvest, we go through the vineyard and we'll each
Take that pH.
well, pretty much
Uh-huh.
we taste a grape. We each taste a grape, and we guess the sugar content. And the same thing, we test like kind of the pH thing, and we play against each other, and then we do take it to the lab and we see who wins, and so we, sometimes you just got to entertain yourself.
Yeah, you do that way. So, and just a little bit more on my work. I grow at my place about 107 different grape varieties. So most are either French American hybrids, so like the Bacos, the Chelois, and that kind of stuff, but also a lot of these heritage ones that were developed in the Hudson Valley and the Boston area. But what I do is, with my 170 grape varieties, I mark down like when they bud out, when they flower, what their sugar level, and I track them. So like, starting in like Labor Day, like what's the sugar level, on August 31st, September 7th, and do it that way. And then when I pick them, so I do track them that way. And actually, and I can send it to you, there's a UMass Amherst is a fruit program, and they have a journal. And I had another article that was just published there on the 2012 grape season and how that was affected by all the things that occurred. So, and I'll send that to you.
Very cool. Yeah, I would love to read that. Very cool. So you kind of hinted about it a little bit, but like, how is Isabella in the vineyard? You talked about it being a late ripener and everything, and you talked about it being susceptible to mildew, right? You said,
yeah,
right, to mildew.
And again, this is compared to Concord, because Concord's like kind of okay. So it's a little, so it isn't like, it's not susceptible like a Chardonnay or anything like that.
Okay.
It's more resilient than like the vinifers. It's just that when they was compared to Concord always won. So that was how that worked out. Oh,
okay. So usually every grape variety, right, when you talk to the winemaker who is in the vineyard and in the winery, there's certain grapes that are either super easy in the vineyard and a little bit more difficult in the winery, or they're a little bit more difficult to maintain in the vineyard and easier in the winery. So which one is Isabella? Is it a little bit more headstrong in the vineyard, or a little bit more headstrong in the winery?
In the vineyard, again, it's somewhat susceptible to fungus disease, but it's still pretty resistant. It's productive. It ripens late, so it's not so good for our area. It's winter hardy, which is good. But the production goes up and down. So I think it's probably a biannual grape. So like, you'll do really well one year, as most apples are. It'll do really well one year and maybe not so well the next year, and it kind of alternates that way. But it's fine in the field, but it's good in the cellar too. So it's good. So
does it tend to be more vegetative, or does it like to go to reproductive quickly?
It is grapey. So yeah, so I mean, I think I wrote down my tasting notes for another one. Inky, very foxy, meaning the wet dog thing there. Dark purple, prunes, perfumey, deep strawberry, Nebraska, very floral, lavender, a lot of lavender, some earth. Like, there's a grape variety called Ives. It's like Ives.
Okay. Would you say it's sweet? Is it sweet? Does it tend to be sweet?
Oh, I make most of my wines dry, so I do it that way. But it probably comes in like around, like, say 19 or so. So you add like a little sugar, and also too, it has a little acid, so I might add a little water to back off the total acidity a little bit. So I do it that way. So, but it's fine. It's fine. I mean, I'm the only time I made it, it came out okay. So I mean, so it's not hard in the cellar. So
if somebody was looking at an Isabella, a bottle of Isabella to buy, say from Brazil, what would they expect when they poured that glass, the wine into the glass?
The ones that are made in Brazil, and I've had a few of them, they tend to make theirs more like rosé, and also do like it's odd. Like in Brazil and in Argentina, they grow a fair amount of Isabella, but I was telling about these other Boston heritage grape varieties. There's this guy, Rogers, from Salem, Massachusetts. He created a grape called, I cannot get it, the German philosopher, Gotte. So basically it's called Gotte. And this little province in Brazil, there's 20,000 acres of this grape variety. And it's kind of a pink grape, but they make either white wines out of it or rosés. So I think what you'll find in Brazil is with the Isabella and the Gotte, they tend to make rosés or red or white wines out of red grape varieties. They tend to do that. While in Moldova, they're big, heavy, inky wines. So they're very, very different. So I think it's versatile in the cellar in that you can make many different kind of wines. But I think if you find the Native Americans growing in Brazil, they'll tend to either make white wines out of red grapes or they'll make rosés out of them, which means they'll be like more acid. They'll be brighter. And I don't know how long the color lasts. So sometimes with some varieties, the color, like the kind of pink color kind of becomes brown really quickly. So I'm not sure how Isabella does it that way, but I think it's made as a very young, fruity kind of a white or rosé. But again, you get one from Moldova, and I'm telling you, if you go to like the section, there's like the section for has Moldova, they'll have Isabella, and they're big, huge, dank things. So with lots of grapes and lots of like perfume.
It's going to be a special wine store that has a section on Moldova.
So no, I mean, like it's not. I mean, two of our local stores have it, and it's not like a Moldova section. It's sort of like, there's France, there's this, there's New York, and there's other. So basically, it's in the other section, and it's really, and it's like $10 a bottle. So I mean, so it's not expensive. So like, it gets good production in those areas that way. So it's like the other section of the liquor store. So, so
other.
Other. Yeah. And basically it's not marked other. It just says this and this, and then there's this quiet area. There's all this other stuff, and it's like $10 a bottle. So that's where you're gonna find
There's crickets going.
Yeah. Except for me, I'm looking for them. So but I saw like Isabella. So
See, if there was a vinifera varietal that you could compare Isabella to kind of tell people what to expect, is there? No. Okay.
I don't think so, because it's like
it's its own personality.
It's a lot softer than most viniferas. It's really a lot more grapey, and it's a lot more got strawberries. And actually, strawberries indicates that there's Labrusca in the background. So if you buy like a Cornell hybrid like Steuben or Noire, they all have that kind of like strawberry cotton candy thing.
Right.
The Isabella has that also, so you can tell there's Labrusca in addition to vinifera in that variety. So I wouldn't say it's like any kind of a vinifera one to describe it, but I would say it would probably be more like Ives, Steuben.
It sounds
like
bigger than the Delaware.
What's that?
It sounds bigger than Delaware, because we've tasted the Delaware, right? So the strawberry, that aspect, the Labrusca part of it, I thought in the Delaware was pretty obvious, but it didn't have that deep color that it sounds like you're explaining. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think what you'll find with the Delaware is I grow some Delaware. I love Delaware, just so you know that. So what I find with the Delawares is like they're kind of soft, but they have muscat and they got guavas and they got tropical fruits. And they're kind of integrated. So it's a little grapey, but there's a whole bunch of other things going on with them, so that you don't, so that you notice the guavas and you notice like the tropical fruit punch stuff. While with Isabella, it's grapes and the wet dog. So you have that, and then the strawberry thing and prunes. So and also Delaware also has more acid, so it can be sharper and crisper, while Isabella is not that way at all. So
okay. And then in your 15 gallons that you are making, generally speaking, with Isabella, is this normally like a tank ferment and aging? Is it oak aging? How would you typically
what I
make that?
put them in is like when I grew up in Newburgh, New York, there's a railroad siding, and like basically a rail car would come in every year, and they would open up and you could buy barrels. So basically, me and my friend went down there, and we bought some 50s, and we bought two 15-gallon Italian chestnut barrels. So it's an Italian chestnut barrel that I've had for over 30 years. So I had port in it for quite a while. Basically, I had like Saval in it, and I had Bacchus in it, and they got older and got more, got older. So I put like sherries and things like that, and general like house whites of some sort. So for the longest time I had ports in them. I just bottled my ports that were in there for like 10 years. So it's empty barrel, and I had it in stainless, the Isabella, so I just put it in that. So it's a 15-gallon Italian chestnut barrel. So that's what it. But it's rounds it off. I mean, the Isabella does go well with Italian chestnut. So it brightens it up, and it's got some floral stuff, but it actually kind of deadens down some of the fruit. So it's actually more of an integrated wine, I think.
So it's still impacting it after all those years?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're not getting any chestnut anymore, but you're getting more just like the roundness that a barrel will provide. One thing you'll find with the Italian chestnut, I used to put Savals in them, and then it has like when you put an Italian chestnut, if you put like a Saval or a Vidal in them, they have like a woody kind of thing, but it's also kind of like aromatic, like Scotch. So I can't tell you how many people who love Scotch, and they would have a Saval that I had put in that barrel, and they were like, I love this Saval, because to them it reminded them of Scotch. It was like aromatic and wood and that kind of stuff that way. But Italian chestnut will add different components to a wine than, like, say, a Hungarian oak or another kind of an oak. So
that I got to go. That's pretty cool, because I don't think I've heard anybody say they use Italian chestnut.
Yeah, that's the first I've heard. Yeah,
they're great barrel. Well, you got the pick. I mean, I've had them for like over 30 years, and they're tight. They work really well. I mean, they're well-made barrels. They're lovely barrels. So
cool.
Yeah.
They just don't make things the way
they do. Now they make them, so you have to buy new ones.
Yeah. So yeah. Some of the barrels, I won't go into that. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
Can we talk about the grape, like in the vineyard? Like, what is an average tonnage that is grown per acre?
It's pretty good. It's probably like, say, 4 ton an acre. And again, it depends on like the ground that you're using, and the year and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a good variety. So like 4 ton an acre. I mean, you wouldn't want to get more than 4 ton an acre, but it could probably go higher. I mean, that's why it's probably being grown in Brazil and Moldova and the Ukraine and and India, because basically it's really productive. And I bet they're probably getting like 8 ton an acre off these things. And that's probably the best thing. So it's like you're getting a lot of tons, some sugar, and it's dark. So you're getting a dark, inky wine that's getting 8 ton an acre. So that's an 8 ton. Let's see, a ton will get you like, say, maybe 180 gallons. So you're probably going to be able to get like, say, 800 gallons per acre with Isabella.
Do they have to drop fruit a lot during the course of the?
If you're producing grapes, you don't. I mean, no. That's like if you're looking for, with an Isabella or an Ives, you don't drop fruit at all. You're trying to get as much as possible. So you prune to do it that way. The vine does seem to have the capacity to produce a lot of fruit and still bring the sugars in, and because of its pigment, it's like a dark color. So and in France and others, particularly in Cornell, they really like dark red wine, so it adds color to it. I think particularly in France they like dark wine, so I think it adds color, and you have enough sugar, and you got tonnage. So I think that's probably why it's doing very well. And you have, I mean, think about it, like I think in New York State there's like 36,000 acres of grapes. So you have in Moldova, a little teeny country, and it has got 26,000 tons. So it's almost the size of the New York wine industry. On this little teeny province has almost as much grapes as New York, and they only grow Isabella. Same thing with India. It's like it's a really hot climate, and it's very, it's like I've been to India several times. It's like it's really hot, but you have like monsoons, torrential downpours, and then just like hot. So it seems to do well there. And you got 11,000 acres there. And Brazil, which is known as being kind of hot too, you got 26,000 acres. So it's something that you can do a lot of things with. So it's probably good in the field there. But mostly it's like you get some sweetness, some color, and you can make a base wine. So
in the vineyard, are the clusters big, small? Are the berries big or small?
They're like
what do they look like?
So they're like a little bit smaller than Concord, and they're like
conical.
Conical. So they're kind of like that. So you do it that way. So
big shoulders.
I think there's one shoulder off to the side. By the way, I'm noticing my clown picture right there. Which is kind of freaky. My grandfather, who was an attorney in the Palm Beach area, he worked for a Colonel Bradley, who was a racehorse person who had places in Palm Beach and Louisville, Kentucky, and lived in the Laurel Astoria. So they were both art collectors, and he was an attorney for this guy Bradley, and they used to collect clowns. So this clown was actually. They purchased that in 1945 from a very nice art gallery that was on Fifth Avenue. And when he died, I got this picture. And mostly because no one else wanted that picture. I was like, you wake up and you're like, you got a clown staring at you. So it's not my room. It's like, it's in my office. It's not a clown you'd want to have there.
My mother used to collect clowns, and my uncle used to draw them, and that actually was one of the first things I noticed back there, was because it looks very similar to the style that my uncle used to draw. And I'll have to later on. I'll have to take a picture of it and send you an email.
It's actually worth some money. The artist is named Ramirez, but basically it was on Fifth Avenue, and he says that's a clown for me. So, and then he brought back to Palm Beach, and where his house was. But again, everyone, the girls are like, I don't want that. So I took it. I figured it's a part of what my grandfather was. So I said, well, I'll take it, but no one really wants to see the clown. So it's kind of freaky. It's kind of freaky in a lot of ways, I got to tell you. So it's not like what I would do, but it's kind of fun. So anyway,
so would you consider Isabella? I mean, well, I guess you kind of have to consider Isabella a hand cell. Right, I mean, you're not really going to.
It's a hand cell, yeah. I think it's a hand cell. No, and I think what you're going to find is like people are going to like it or not like it. And also, too, you can make different things out of it. If you're making like a rosé, it'll be kind of bright, strawberries, like a little cherry, and you do it that way. Or like some people like the Guinea red, with the Elegante. This is more like that. It's like big, heavy, dank, lots of pigment. So you can do it that way. So you can make a different style. So it would be a hand cell, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, exactly. So.
I not to be mean, but I can't imagine you going into a wine shop and too many sommeliers or a restaurant and too many sommeliers say, let's build an entire wine list around Isabella.
Yeah, or going to Astor Liquors in like Lower Manhattan saying, hey, we got our Isabella section. So.
I'm looking for Isabella wine. Do you have one?
So,
I think that will throw some people.
It's a good historic grape though, for the standpoint of like in the U.S., like from 1810 to 1830, they wanted to grow grapes for wine or for George or whatever. So they were looking for things, and this is the one. And basically, they found it in someone's backyard. They said, "This is good enough," and it lives. And that's how just like Delaware, just like Catawba, just like Iona, just like Humilian. There's many other Winchell. There's all these varieties that it was because that's what lived. And then you had people in the Hudson Valley and St. Louis and then Boston purposely breeding grapes as they were in France. But basically, they were trying to do things that way. Here's like. People were doing this. They were just looking for things. So they just went to people's backyards and say, "Well, that's good enough for me." So,
Steve, we know grapevines, they change their production volume as they age. Does Isabella do that? I mean, can you taste the difference between like a new vine and old vine?
I would think so, but again, you understand like where the niche is for Isabella in Europe and in Brazil and India is like big production wine. So it's like a big jug kind of a wine thing. So whether it's like old or young, I think if it gets like older, it's not producing as much, they probably like rip it out and put more in to like get more production. Right. So, but I think
they don't allow it to age.
Yeah, I don't. They're not aging wines at all. I think it's like. I mean, I haven't been to France, but I hear like they used to. I don't know if that's the case anymore. Like you go to the grocery store and then like you put the spigot on and you get the milk jug of whatever it is. This will be that kind of a wine, I think. Okay. So you do it that way. So it's not something you're aging. You're not putting in a barrel. It's in a big tank, and then you get it for whatever a gallon. That's what I think. So but it's still historically it's very interesting because basically it's one of the first grapes that were really grown in the U.S. for wine production, in addition to Catawba and a few others. But there was like 3 of them. So there wasn't a lot of grapes. So like this is what they worked with for probably 20 or 30 years. So.
Wow.
Wow. And so when I was looking it up, Isabella typically only has like one seed in it. So like, and it, one, maybe two seeds. So that's very different, or at least to vinifera. Is that typical with the heritage grapes to have that few seeds?
I don't know. Concord's probably got like 3, I think. Yeah. I don't really know. I know a bit about heritage grape varieties and how to make wine and blah, blah, in 50 years, blah, blah. But the number of seeds that each variety has, I kind of don't know. I don't know that at all. But
see, I got to go geeky. I always go too geeky.
Yeah. How many seeds? So, yeah.
Because I was like reading, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's only got one seed. That's not a typical for.
That is unique. That is unique because most have 2 to 3 per. And like some of them have like 5.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
Right.
If you go to Foch, it's got like 40. It's unbelievable. It's like skin, a little pulp, and seeds. That's all it is.
Wow.
Wow.
Like not that many, but there's like probably.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
So now that you're making your first barrel of Isabella, are you doing anything different with the winemaking process as you would another heritage wine?
What I try and do when I make heritage wines is to me a heritage wine is a grape or a wine that's from an area that actually influenced the area. So like in the Hudson Valley, French American hybrids came in by Philip Wagner, who was a nurseryman from Maryland, but basically he was like the editor for the Baltimore Sun, and he was the Paris chief. So basically when the Nazis started coming in, he got lots of grapes and smuggled them into, or cuttings, smuggled them into Canada and then brought them to the Hudson Valley. So that's why I view all these things as heritage things. So, but as far as like Isabella, it's heritage because like it's part of our past, I think. I think that's probably the best way I could say that. I don't think I answered your question at all.
No, you did not.
I did not. I went on a tangent, and then I got to a point, and I said, I went somewhere. I was going to go to a point, but I didn't. Let's try it again. So
in the production of your Isabella wine, can you go through the process and see if it's any different from, a vinifera or another,
Oh, I see. They're probably different. What I did was I was actually in the Finger Lakes for a different reason. I had to pick up some Iona juice, and there was a guy there who had Isabella juice. And I said, I'll get 15 gallons. And I bought the stuff. They had not started fermenting it, but it was also a deep color already. So I didn't get the grapes and ferment them in the skin. That's why this is actually a fairly lighter Isabella. But if I got the grapes and fermented it, I bet it'd be like inky black. It'd be like Dushnak. It would be like Loire. It'd be like a big thing that way. So what I do is I got the juice, brought it back, and then just fermented it and I try to keep it clean. So like what I do is when I do a lot of these heritage varieties is I try not to like do a lot of different styles. What I try and do is do a similar style for all of them so I can compare what a Vidal is like compared to a Saval as opposed to an Isabella. So I tend to use the same kind of yeast and the same way of making wines so I can compare them that way. And then when I get to a point where I say, that's a good grape variety, then I start doing different things. So like in my own work, what I'm working with a lot more, I've identified as like a grape called Burden 6055, Palmer, which is a grape that I was found here at my farm right here. Le Cornell is a good one. Jefferson. So I've identified of these hundreds of heritage grape varieties, ones that are really good, I think, in the field and in the cellar. So now what I'm doing with those grape varieties, I'm putting more of them in, and now I'm starting to like use different yeasts, put them in oak, different skin contact times. So I'm doing it that way. So
I'm going to go geeky again, but not that geeky.
Uh-huh.
So if Isabella is such a late harvesting grape variety, like in the future, do you see you're tinkering with maybe co-fermenting it with a later varietal, vinifera grape, or a later varietal, another heritage grape, like a co-fermenting concept?
I think what actually would do well with actually is co-fermenting with beer. What I'm doing, I'm not joking, because what I'm doing right now, because I have kids who are like under 30, and a lot of them actually have friends who are beer makers. So in the Catskill area, we have 6 different breweries. So I know the brew makers because they're my kids' friends. So this year, for the first time, I sold quite a few of my New England Heritage Variety grapes to a winery or to a brewery called Subversive. And basically, it's a beer wine. So I took all these grapes and they co-fermented them to do it that way. So I think what Isabella would probably be good for is co-fermenting to make a beer.
Okay. I am seeing that more and more. We have a brewery, in Tin City in Paso, and on their list there's a Zinfandel beer or there's a Syrah beer. But although I could be wrong, my understanding was they were actually using the pumice, not the actual grape itself.
Here, that at least, I mean, they're all experimenting in this area. So basically, what they wanted the whole grapes. We crushed them up, and if you look at my Facebook page at all, and again, I do Facebook stuff mostly like as educational things with pictures. So feel free to do whatever you want. But if you look at that thing, there is like in October when I sent the grapes to Subversive Brewery in Catskill, it has pictures. But basically, we crushed them all up and we put them in the hopper with the beer stuff, and they co-fermented and they did it that way. So, and the odd thing about the ones that are from the Boston area is like what are the grapes? Like Agawam, Massaoit, Barry. There's another one. Their colors are very different than Isabella, which is like kind of dank and like a deep purple. The ones from the New England area are they're like Star Trek colors. It's like electric blue, hot pink. So like the beers come out like hot pink, electric blue. So
they're gonna fly off the shelf.
So people seem to like that. And one of the grapes that's hybridized into the New England hybrids is a black Hamburg. So it's got that muscat thing, but it's got that electric blue thing. So like it's very attractive that way. But I'm thinking going back to Isabella, it's got lots of grapey flavors. It doesn't have a lot of high pH, so like you don't want a high pH grape going into a beer because you don't want that. My understanding. So I think Isabella would actually be good as a co-fermenting with beer.
Cool.
Yeah.
So Steve, what's in your glass to Isabella, and when it's co-fermented with beer, what would you pair them each with?
I like eating. So, but I'm not a big pairing. I mean,
Would you pair an Isabella with a dessert?
Yeah, probably dessert. Yeah, it'd be more like a port. I would probably put it with like a Stiltberg or like any kind of the blue cheeses. I would probably do that, or smoked cheeses. I would probably put it with more things like that, not as a dinner wine when you're having your steak. I would have it beforehand or afterwards. That's what I would do.
And like a berry pie.
Yeah, I was thinking like a blueberry pie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It would stand up to it. It would be different enough where you could actually taste the blueberry pie and the wine. Yes, I would think something like that. I think I'm not a gourmand I am, which means you eat a lot, so I can do that. So
You just want somebody else to make it.
Yeah, I took 3 years of French, so I know the difference between those two. Like gourmet is like you know, and the gourmand's like you eat a lot. So but I think it would probably do with like the blue cheeses, and then I think the aged cheeses and like a blueberry pie. It would do well that way. But if you were having it with like a chicken dish or a fish dish, I wouldn't do that. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, unless the chicken dish was like made with some type of a jammy, because there's
exactly. Mm-hmm.
You got to match kind of match the flavors into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I never would go with my grilled cheese because I always put I put jam on my grilled cheese.
Oh, do you?
Really?
All the time. Yep.
What kind of jam though?
Usually blackberry jam.
Mm.
So
interesting.
Yeah, so toast the bread so that it gets warm, and then I use my little griddle, panini press type thing, and the cheese goes on, and then the blackberry jam goes on, and it goes. That's
And
how
you're
I
all
make it.
set.
All set.
I put
Yummy,
bacon
yummy.
on my grilled cheeses or tomatoes. Or bacon and tomato.
Yeah, there you go.
Or caramelized onions.
Oh, no.
So do it that way. So, yeah, but but you'll find not Iona, but like Isabella's like a big, huge. There's lots of flavors in it though, so it's kind of interesting that way. That's I think what the cheese would do well. So
cool. Now, so you did mention your Facebook page, and I believe, Stephen, that you can see the chat on your right-hand side of your screen if you hit chat. If you
okay, yep, okay.
If you want to just type in your Facebook page so that people in the chat can see it, and then if you can tell us where, verbally tell us where people can find you, so that we can link up. And of course, Debbie and I will link up anything. I don't know if you're on Instagram also, or
I tend not to do a lot of that stuff. Like some people said, my daughter's like, "Oh, you got to do that." That seems like that's a whole nother thing. So I do like a little Facebook stuff, but mostly probably the best place to see my work is, and I wrote it down because I'm just one of those guys. Of course, I don't have it right here. So basically, if you go to the website HudsonValleyHeritageWines.com, so HudsonValleyHeritageWines.com, it will have like all the grape varieties that I work with, what they're like, what kind of wines they make. Or if you go to the Malaya Estate Vineyards website, you can actually buy a lot of those wines. So you can buy a Baco and a Chalois and a Bourdain and a Palmer, and you can do it that way. So I would say Malaya Estate Vineyards will be good. And also, too, if you go to them and say, I want to talk to Steve, they'll send that email to me, and then I can talk to people. So if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. So I would think Malaya Estate Vineyards to contact me, or that Hudson Valley Heritage Wines to get pictures of the grape varieties that I grow and do it that way. So, and then also my email address is just my last name, Casscles, Casscles, J as in Joseph, S as in Steve, @Yahoo.
All right.
Simple's better than hard.
There you go.
Thank you so much for.
I just have one more question, Deb, because
question?
I forgot to write it. Is if you want our our followers and listeners to remember 2 things about Isabella, what 2 things do you want them to remember?
I think it's a fun variety, and you can do a lot of different things in the cellar with it. You can make rosés and big, heavy wines out of it. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I like that it's fun.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a union of Moldova and Brazil.
Yeah. Put them on the soccer field.
And India. In India, they call it Bangalore Blue. They said, well, that's what we're going to call it. So
I'm going to go in a shop, and I'm going to go, I want some Bangalore Blue.
Blue, that's it.
And they're going to look at you and say, what?
Unless you're in Flushing, and then in Flushing, you can get whatever you want. So or Rego Park. So
yeah.
Good.
But thank you so much for coming.
And yeah, thank you. And then we'll talk afterwards as far as what you want, but it will be good. So thank you very much.
Well,
thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed it.
It was a blast talking to you. I'm laughing. It's a good time. And to learn, you are a wealth of knowledge about so many different grape varieties. And, the Isabella, I'm going to go out and I'm going to look for an Isabella. I'm going to go try one. So
I'm going to go into a store. I'll go into a store down here and ask for it. They'll be like, huh? What are you talking
The
about?
prize might be like, oh, it's over there.
I can't even get a good Spanish wine down here. Who are you kidding?
Sorry. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much now.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, bye now.
And take care.
Okay, bye.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Okay.